digital media with their phones, tablets, watching TV, whatever it is. YouTube is now everywhere where everyone goes. You stand in a grocery line and people are watching YouTube or whatever they're doing. And what that means is they're spending 70% of their waking hours consuming media. And in fact, the average family spends 8 hours a week together talking and paying attention to each other. And as these devices become and have been ubiquitous for over a decade now, millennials spend more time on their smartphone than they do with their significant others. In fact, these devices that help us so much and help us in our own industry, they're our friend, our coworker, our lifeline, they are taking over. And so it's no surprise that people are seeking opportunities to disengage. And even today, many of you will have tapped, clicked, swiped, or looked at your phone about 100 times before I'm done. That's what the stats say. I find this really hard to believe. I am really pleased with Apple because it tells me every week how I'm doing on screen time. It varies, but it is a nice reminder to disengage. But this is a real stat, and it's growing. And like I said, there's two sides to this coin. It really helps us. It helps us deliver better experiences, but it also sucks us in, and it makes it really hard to disengage. So it's no surprise that vacation rental travelers are growing. This is a fast-growing industry, and not just in the US, but globally. Because as people seek to disengage and disconnect, they want to then reconnect with friends and family together. They're not as interested in going off by themselves. And what's the best place to have friends and families gather? It's not in 4 hotel rooms, it's in vacation rental homes. So this is what we do. We enable these meaningful connections, and it's something that we should be really, really proud of. And Amy mentioned this earlier. This industry is driven a lot by women. We have something, and Matt mentioned this, and I was like, oh my gosh, we did not talk. I actually haven't met you. I will come say hi afterwards. But he mentioned Superpower, and this is how I think about this. And I'm going to show you the data to prove it. But you guys know this. Women have a superpower. Women and allies of women have a superpower of empathy and understanding. And that is at the core of what creates great hospitality, which is what makes this industry work so well. And so let's talk a little bit about the history of this. We all grew up as kids, GPAs, LSATs, MCATs, SATs, whatever it was, and your IQ. So some people took IQ tests, some people didn't. But we all heard that the better the score that you had in these areas, the more successful you were going to be. It was going to open all these doors for you, and you were going to excel in business. Well, I'm here to tell you that high IQ isn't everything. In fact, research showed, and this blew everybody away, research showed that people with average IQ outperform those with the highest IQ 70% of the time. 70% of the time. And this was turned this belief completely upside down. And now there's been research that's been done to go how is this true and why? We've all heard that high IQ is what makes you successful. But now we're seeing that that's not the case. So what is it? What's the magic? The magic is emotional intelligence, something called EQ. And there's real power in this emotional intelligence. In fact, studies were done, extensive studies were done, and we have everything noted in the slides, but extensive studies were done that identified, the Hay Group was one of them, psychologists at Rutgers, for example, Daniel Goleman, that tried to identify what is this emotional intelligence and what are the things that what are the key attributes of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is essentially, it's kind of what you would imagine. It's the way we relate with the world. It's how we navigate social complexities. It's the decisions that we make every day that drive successful outcomes. And so there were like 5 kind of key attributes that were identified. One is self-awareness. Another one is self-control, empathy, listening skills, and internal motivation. So what I call like passion and grit. And so think about that, passion and grit. So internal motivation, empathy, and listening skills. And so companies started doing surveys, and they discovered what you see here. Top performers all possessed high EQ. Managers preferred hiring people with high EQ. And so one company in particular, Google, went back through 15 years of hiring practices, and looking at like who excelled and who persisted. Because as you know, Google, being one of the largest tech companies, was known for hiring very advanced STEM students, so graduates of computer science, physicists, et cetera. And so they thought that was the key. That was the key in hiring. And they were famous for like these different tests they would give you, these problems that you had to solve. I actually interviewed there once, and it was for a management position. And at the very end of it, the woman says to me, "So how many things can you make out of a paperclip?" I'm like, really? How many things can I make out of a paperclip? Of course, I'm competitive, so I'm like, naming them all off. But afterwards, I was like, I don't want this job. If that's the thing that is the deal breaker, that's not what I'm signing up for. Anyway, so Google actually identified 7 things that were key indicators of success, and these are the top 6. The 7th was the STEM background. It was the skills. But what they realized is that people needed to be good coaches, they needed to listen, and they needed to have empathy. And in fact, I had to console my nephew. He was a computer science graduate at Waterloo, and he interviewed with Google, and he got to the 3rd round, and then they said, sorry, but you're not mature enough. You need, go get some work experience somewhere else. Let them, deal with the maturity, and then come back. Like, you have the skills, we're interested, but you need to go and get some maturity. So he was heartbroken. However, he went to a gaming company, so I don't know. We'll see how that turns out. But this really turned things upside down. This was called Project Oxygen. You can look it up. It's really, really super fascinating. And so the upshot is that EQ actually outwins IQ. And in an industry that is really built around human connection, having these superpowers around EQ, it's imperative. It is what makes this industry work. And so it's probably not a surprise to you, but women are particularly good at this. And in these measurements of these attributes, and this was like millions of people that were interviewed, and they looked at lots of performance review data. And what they found is that 45% of women are more likely to demonstrate empathy consistently. This is 45% more likely than men to demonstrate empathy consistently. It doesn't mean men don't do it. It's about that consistency. And in fact, in all of the different traits, women either slightly outranked on EQ, or significantly, except for one in which there was no statistical significance. And it had to do with like emotional reaction. And so women are particularly good at this. And so it's kind of no surprise that our industry is made up largely by women who manage or own vacation rentals and have built and grown this industry and business. And so your EQ is your superpower. It's what makes you particularly great at providing those great experiences to your guests, at growing strong teams, at being fantastic partners. There's lots of partners here. It's all part of it. And so we know, though, that it's not, with all the data, there's still a long ways to go. And I love this little tidbit. So the name John represents 3.3% of the male population. 3.3% of the male population, and women make up over 50% of the total population. Yet, there are fewer women in leadership positions than men named John. There's lots of fun stats like this, but I thought this one was particularly funny. And so, when we think about those challenges, and we know when we think about this industry, what we realize is that building great products and services requires creativity, empathy, and diversity of thinking. And I think about that a lot. And so they mentioned a little bit about my background, but it is something, I've worked on products that have had a lot of consumer touch points and a lot of B2B touch points. And one of the things that I ran global teams too. One of the things that I always made sure is that there was some diversity of thinking, that our approach, while scientific and maybe data-driven, also incorporated amount of diversity and inclusivity. And when we look at companies or products or services that don't do this, we notice a couple of funny things. How many of you know the story of the sports bra? Like, how many know where it came from? Wow, not one hand? Okay. So I love this story. So the sports bra was developed in 1977 by two women, Linda and Polly. Polly was a costume designer, and Linda was I think she was a marathon runner or something. And so there was a problem that needed addressing, and there was nothing out there that was helping. And so the sports bra used to be called the jock bra, and what they did is they deconstructed jock straps and turned it into the first sports bra. And so flash forward 40 years, why am I telling this story? Okay, flash forward 40 years, and I know you have all tried sports bras that are not good. I am interviewing a designer at one of the top athletic brands. I'm looking for a designer, and I'm interviewing this designer, and he tells me, I said, well, hey, talk about diversity, inclusivity, you have women's products, men's products, shoes, all the different things. And he said, well, I'll tell you a story of why I suddenly decided I wanted to leave. He's like, I'm sitting around the table, and we have been working on the new line of women's sports bras. And I'm brought in to start working on the marketing material. And he goes, and so it's got all the designers. It's got the product designers there. It's got material designers there. It's like the whole team is there, and we're walking through what's the inspiration for it, whatever. He goes, I look around the room, all men. He said, not one woman worked on this product. And he's like, I decided that I think I needed to leave. He did bring it up, and he said the next meeting there were a few women, but they were just working on the marketing of it. So who knows? On a slightly more serious note, we all know that for decades the medical community has equated normal with male. And what I want to point out is that it's not a bias that kind of created this. It was just a lack of awareness. In fact, it was an assumption that we were alike enough and similar enough that the studies, I guess, could be attributed to women. And so, we know, and one thing I find really funny, Baltimore has done the longest aging study. It's been going on for over 20 years at least, and it is tracked 1,000 men through the study, no women. But women make up the majority of the aging elderly population. So it's interesting that even when you have data that supports what your sample should be, it's still not used. And so it's just a lack of awareness. Another study, and everybody's familiar with this, we all remember when it came out, an aspirin a day could help lower the risk of heart disease. 22,000 people were tested or ran through the research study, and they were all men, not one woman. Yet these get promoted and marketed to everybody, and they're definitely rethinking this. We all have seen advances in this area, some of it through Supreme Court decisions, et cetera. But just, this is a little bit of a less lighter example, but it is just the example that it's not about somebody doing something wrong or about being biased or intentionally excluding people. It's just a lack of awareness. And so it's something that I think about, quite a bit. In fact, and we know this, that 70% of travel decisions are made by women. And in HomeAway, our own data supports that. We see 70% of our planners and our bookers are women. And so one of the things I have to be careful about as a product leader is that we don't just actually look at what women want. That certainly is definitely important, but I don't want to fall into the lack of awareness. And so I'm going to share a funny video with you, because we do bring in people from all over the world into our user labs, and they either reinforce some things, but they also surprise us sometimes. So let's take a look at this.
My personal opinion, I think this would score well for like when women are involved in the trip, and there's women involved in this trip. I think they would really like the collaboration, the user interface, being picky about pros and cons. I question it if I was going on like a bachelor party. A lot of guys I notice are pretty passive when it comes to making decisions like this. But I could really see the female sex enjoying this, and because they would be on that trip, I consider it being used.
So no surprise, right? We're showing him some abilities for planners to book vacation rentals, and I think he thinks the female sex would use this, and that he and his guy friends wouldn't use it. But we push harder, and when you focus on the creativity, the empathy, the the inclusivity of everybody, of the travel population, sometimes you can delight them, and they'll engage with your products.
My personal opinion, I think this would score well for
That was my bad. There we go.
That's awesome.
Would that motivate any of your travelers to get in there?
Yeah, I think so.
Why is that?
Where people sleep is so important to them. It's a really creative idea. I think for sure it would work. It would really get the buy-in. If someone just said, hey, this is first come, first serve. That's pretty cool. I like that idea. I don't know, it always, when I go on guys trips, the first thing is scouring the house and trying to find which bed is best for you.
Got it.
And trying to be swift about it.
So that was really fun. We had a lot of fun with this. And so, obviously as a product leader, I want to solve customers' problems, and so this really actually tickled us, because it's something we ask ourselves: are we doing something that is only going to appeal to one type of traveler? And while it's a very important traveler, often the decision maker, there are many people that are on the trip, and so so one of the things too, especially with AI and machine learning becoming much more pervasive in helping surface the right properties to people, for example, or maybe creating urgency messaging to let them know if a destination's booking out or the type of home that they're looking for is booking out. Those are very simple examples, but even in those examples, we have to make sure that we're not engaged in a lack of awareness and biased sampling. Otherwise, you end up with products that don't work. You end up with facial recognition technology that identifies women 60% of the time as being men, because the sample size was only white men, for example, who happen to be famous. So they're older white men, I guess. Or faucets that don't work because they don't recognize a skin color other than a white skin color. So these are things that are real that we want to avoid. And so it's something to pay attention to, especially because more and more people from around the world is getting smaller. There are lots of middle income populations that are growing in countries other than the US that are coming to the US, which is great for our business, but it's something then we have to think about and consider. And the great news is that we are uniquely situated to do that very, very well because we have the superpower around empathy and understanding. And so we seek out how do we best provide experiences for guests from all over the world. And that's what it's about. It's about providing those best experiences. And that is what then enables us to meet their needs. It's what enables them to have a great experience. And it is about empathy being the key to hospitality. Somebody mentioned hospitality earlier. Empathy is the key to hospitality, to great hospitality, and providing those experiences. And it's how you grow your business. And so we're going to hear from Anita, who did just that.
I am Anita Foster, and I am in the cabin rental business. The path started several years ago. Didn't have a job, didn't know what I was going to do, so I started cleaning cabins for private owners. I've been down to scraping the bottom, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And cleaning cabins got me back on my feet. Every day I would go home with that laundry from those cabins, washing clothes all night long. I just kept going, one of these days I'm going to have me one of these rental things. And I did it. I did it 8 times. The first rental property that I had was a little creekside cabin, and all of a sudden I get all these inquiries and all these bookings, and I'm like, it's renting. And I get out of the car and I do a little dance, and I'm like, it's going. If I toot my horn a little bit, I'm very proud of myself. I still do clean cabins, but not just any cabins, my cabins.
Isn't that exciting? I think I got goosebumps. We've all sort of experienced that, right? We've all experienced seeing this grow, and it grows because we're providing such great experiences. And Anita probably resonates with many of you here. The passion, the empathy, and the determination. And so bringing it full circle back to our guests, the travelers, and the unique moments that they seek, so they can disconnect to reconnect to their loved ones. We know at the end of the day, all of us here, whether we're vacation rental owners or managers, that it's not just about growing a business. It's about delighting these travelers so they can have these amazing experiences together. This is your unique superpower, the empathy, the hospitality, and it's what makes this business and this industry thrive. It's because of all of you. Thank you.